He believed the world was a mistake, that suffering wasn't an accident, but the rule, that love was just biology pretending to be poetry. He rejected fame, disdained society. He lived alone, wrote in silence, and spent his days walking through the park, not with people, but with dogs, 12 of them. His name was Arthur Schopenhauer. History called him the philosopher of despair. But here's the paradox. In all his darkness, he lit a lantern for those lost inside their own. So if you've ever felt like you don't quite belong here, this story might be yours too. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in the free city of Danzig. His cradle was carved from privilege, wealth, education, cultural polish. But beneath the surface, cracks had already formed. Cracks that would one day shape a man who no longer trusted the world to hold together. His father, Heinrich, was a hard, pragmatic man, a merchant obsessed with control, structure, and the rational order of things. His mother, Johanna, was brilliant, witty, and emotionally distant. She would go on to become a celebrated novelist and socialite in Weimar's literary salons. But to Arthur, she was always a stranger, warm to others, cold to him. He once asked her why she never loved him. She said, "You are impossible to love." When Arthur was 17, his father fell, perhaps jumped, from a warehouse balcony. The official cause was listed as accident, but those close to the family whispered suicide. Schopenhauer never forgot the silence that followed, not just the loss of his father, but the way no one mourned. His mother hosted a dinner party 3 days later. Grief did not teach him to reach out. It taught him to retreat. While his peers chased success, Schopenhauer chased truth. He studied medicine first, then philosophy. At the University of Göttingen, he read Plato, Kant, and the Vedas by candlelight. He was drawn to ancient thought like a man drawn to the sound of his own name, spoken in a forgotten tongue. He traveled to Italy, walked Roman ruins, lingered in monasteries, fascinated not by God, but by silence. He began to see the world not as a divine plan or rational structure, but as a blind, ceaseless will, a force that drives all living things to want, to crave, to suffer. Desire, he believed, was the root of human misery. And the world? A theater of unending disappointment. Life is a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. He returned to Germany with a manuscript that would become his life's work. The World as Will and Representation. He expected the world to listen. It didn't. His timing was poor. He had the misfortune of publishing alongside Hegel, the reigning star of German philosophy. Hegel preached reason, progress, and the unfolding triumph of spirit. Schopenhauer called him a fraud and scheduled his university lectures at the same hour, out of defiance. No one came. The rejection was total. He walked away from academia and never returned. He withdrew from public life, moved into a modest apartment, took long walks, and one by one began adopting dogs. They were small poodles, gentle, alert, and loyal. He named them Atman, a Sanskrit word meaning soul or true self. Some say he gave them all the same name, so that even as they died and were replaced, the soul, to him, remained the same. In a world he called a prison of pain, dogs were the only companions who asked for nothing but presence. No lies, no masks, no theories of the absolute, just the warmth of fur against a tired hand. While the world mocked him as bitter and mad, Schopenhauer was slowly writing a philosophy not of despair, but of radical honesty. Arthur Schopenhauer was not trying to save the world. He was trying to describe it, honestly, without euphemism, without false hope. And in doing so, he gave generations of thinkers, artists, and truth seekers something far more valuable than optimism: clarity. In 1818, he published his masterpiece, The World as Will and Representation. At its core was a devastating idea. That reality, beneath all appearances, is driven by the will, a blind, insatiable force, pulsing through all life. We eat, we desire, we compete, we suffer. Not because we are rational, but because we are trapped in an endless cycle of craving. This wasn't just philosophy. It was a psychological X-ray of the human condition. What we call the world, Schopenhauer argued, is a mental construct, a representation formed by our mind, framed by space, time, and causality. But what lies beneath that veil, what truly governs our behavior, is not logic, not virtue, but will. He was among the first Western philosophers to center suffering in a complete metaphysical system. Long before Freud, he pointed to unconscious drives. Long before existentialists, he stripped life of inherent meaning and dared to ask, if life is suffering, how should we live? He turned, surprisingly, to art, in the stillness of a painting, in the pure form of a sonata, in the suspended moment of beauty. We are, for a while, free from the will, no longer wanting, no longer grasping, just perceiving. Art, he wrote, offers a temporary liberation from suffering. And of all the arts, he believed music stood highest, because it didn't represent the will. It was the will, made audible. In his essay on the metaphysics of music, he explained that music bypasses language and intellect, speaking directly to the essence of being. Schopenhauer also made a bold ethical turn. In his collection, On the Basis of Morality, he rejected religious commandments and utilitarian calculations. For him, the only genuine source of morality was compassion, the felt recognition of suffering in others, not abstract principles, not duty, but the raw experience of empathy. He was also a rare voice in his time to speak of animals with moral seriousness. They suffer, they feel, therefore they matter. This made him a precursor of modern animal ethics and one of the first philosophers in the West to echo the Buddhist and Hindu reverence for life. Indeed, Schopenhauer was profoundly influenced by Eastern thought. He studied the Upanishads, Buddhist sutras, and Taoist texts, and saw in them a mirror of his own conclusion, that liberation begins when we silence the will. He didn't stop at theory. In Parerga and Paralipomena, a later work composed of shorter essays and reflections, he offered piercing insights into art, psychology, women's rights, solitude, reading, writing, and the bitter comedy of being human. Though his ideas were ignored for decades, their seeds quietly spread. Nietzsche built his early philosophy upon Schopenhauer's foundations, calling him the first honest philosopher. Freud adapted his view of unconscious drives into psychoanalysis. Wagner, after reading Schopenhauer, reshaped his operas to reflect the metaphysics of suffering. Writers like Tolstoy, Thomas Mann, Marcel Proust, Jorge Luis Borges all wrestled with his ideas. Even today, echoes of Schopenhauer appear in fields he never imagined. In cognitive science, exploring how perception filters reality. In Buddhist psychology, guiding people toward detachment. In minimalism, which favors simplicity over craving. And in a growing cultural shift that sees silence, solitude, and truth as acts of courage, not weakness. What did he leave us? Not comfort, not answers, but a way to see clearly, to feel deeply, and to live. Not above the suffering, but through it. In a world obsessed with noise and novelty, Schopenhauer offered the deepest kind of wisdom: how to endure, how to find stillness in a storm, and how to meet life, not with illusion, but with eyes wide open. So what do we do with this truth? Schopenhauer never promised redemption, but he offered something else, a path of lucidity. In a world that worships pleasure and distraction, he invited us to pause, to look at life without illusion, to stop running. He believed that our greatest liberation does not come from chasing desire, but from releasing it, from choosing simplicity over excess, quiet over noise, clarity over comfort. In Solitude, Schopenhauer found not despair, but an inner world untouched by the chaos outside. He surrounded himself not with friends or students, but with dogs, 12 of them over the years, each named Atman, a Sanskrit word meaning the inner soul. He did not see them as pets, but as spiritual companions, free of hypocrisy, free of cruelty, wiser in their silence than most men in their speech. He chose to live on the margins, but from there, he saw deeply. And what he saw still matters, because it speaks to something timeless in all of us. We all suffer. We all long. We all try to make sense of a world that so often doesn't. And perhaps, like Schopenhauer, we don't need to fix the world to live meaningfully in it. Perhaps what we need is to face it without lies, to sit with the silence, to look suffering in the eye and still choose kindness, still choose beauty, still choose to create. Arthur Schopenhauer died without applause, no headlines, no legacy carved in stone. And yet, his voice still echoes, not through noise, but through the quiet that remains when every illusion falls away. If you've ever felt the weight of existence, if you've ever questioned the purpose behind the pain, if solitude sometimes feels more honest than conversation, then perhaps, in some strange way, you've already walked beside him. Now we ask you, what did his story awaken in you? Where did it meet your own? Share your thoughts below. We read them, quietly but carefully. And if this kind of reflection speaks to you, if you're drawn not to answers, but to questions that linger, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe. Not for content, but for company, in a search that never ends. This channel isn't trying to go viral. It's trying to go inward, to meet you where your words end and your truth begins.